All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are unpacking something absolutely massive, a foundational concept that dramatically shifts how we view our entire purpose in the world. We're looking at the biblical narrative of how Jesus Christ completely restored our lost identity and authority. It's a journey from a tragic loss to a staggering, absolute victory. Just picture a spectacular kingdom for a second. Imagine the rightful heir has been tragically driven right off the throne. It's a pretty powerful metaphor for the story of humanity, right? This was a breathtaking realm, packed with resources uniquely designed for harmony from the very beginning. The world was perfectly set up for its inhabitants to thrive and rule with real purpose. But here's the wild part. The palace, it still stands. The people are all still there. But the actual authority meant to govern it all has been entirely lost. The infrastructure is completely intact. Humanity is still here, the earth is still here, but that life-giving stewardship, the righteous authority that was supposed to guide everything under the Creator's design, is just gone. And this wasn't just about ruling. It was about cultivating, protecting, and reflecting a perfect order. And because of that loss, chaos steps in to replace order. Darkness spreads where light used to reign. The absence of that rightful authority doesn't just leave an empty vacuum, it actively invites destruction. Fear replaces peace. This perfectly mirrors what happened to humanity when sin entered the picture. It deeply corrupted the authority and the fundamental identity we were originally entrusted with. So, that brings us to a huge, pivotal question. When the true king returns to reclaim his inheritance, what exactly does he restore to humanity? I mean, it's so easy to think of salvation as just some future destination, right? But what we're seeing here is so much deeper. It isn't just a future promise, it's about the profound, immediate restoration of our human identity right now. Section 1. The Kingdom Lost. To really grasp the magnitude of what this means, we've got to rewind all the way back to the beginning in Genesis. We're looking at a pretty devastating contrast here. On the left side, you have Eden's original harmony, perfect fellowship with the Creator, zero fear, no shame, and this beautiful mandate to steward creation. Adam wasn't meant to rule independently. He represented a righteous rule. But look at the right side. Following the fall, that reality completely shatters. The relationship was broken. Humanity became enslaved to sin, and that pristine authority became entirely corrupted. The core human identity was fractured.
But even right in the middle of that judgment, God dropped a massive promise. An offspring would eventually come to crush the serpent. And this kicks off centuries of intense anticipation. By the 15th century BC, the Passover lamb pointed directly to him. In the 14th century, the whole sacrificial system and tabernacle were built to foreshadow his ultimate sacrifice. Jump to the 8th century BC, and you've got prophets boldly announcing his coming. All of this history was marching toward that 1st century AD moment when the true king was finally born.
Fast forward, and Jesus hits the scene. Now, what's really interesting here is that his earthly miracles weren't just flashy displays of power. They were absolute proof that the true king and his kingdom had officially arrived. He lived in perfect obedience, commanded actual storms to obey him, healed the sick, and literally raised the dead. Where Adam failed in a perfect garden, Jesus remained perfectly faithful in a broken world. His authority was always exercised in perfect love, signaling the dawn of our restored identity. Now, to the people watching at the time, the cross looked like a brutal, devastating defeat. The Son of God was mocked and crucified. It looked like the definitive end of the story. But on that cross, Jesus took the judgment humanity deserved. 3 days later, that tomb was empty. The fundamental power of death was utterly broken, turning what looked like a total defeat into history's absolute greatest victory. And here is the clincher. After that empty tomb, Jesus didn't just claim some leftover authority. He claimed all of it. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Not limited, not partial, all of it. And right after declaring this absolute sovereignty, he connects that authority directly to the mission he gives his followers, to go and make disciples of all nations. Which brings us to Section 2, our restored identity. This victory triggers an incredible pivot to the absolute core of our explainer today. Because the authority he won back isn't just kept in some distant heaven. It actively and fundamentally changes your identity right here, right now. Think about the veil in the temple. This wasn't some flimsy living room curtain. It was a massive, incredibly thick physical barrier blocking sinful humanity out of the most holy place. Only the high priest could go in, and only once a year. But when Jesus died, that specific veil was miraculously torn from top to bottom. The barrier was completely destroyed. No human priest is needed anymore. Every single follower now has direct, confident access to the Creator. Because of that unbelievable access, we're looking at an entirely new reality. We aren't viewed as servants operating out of fear anymore. You are adopted directly into God's family. You are forgiven of all sin, completely remade as an entirely new creation. The chains of slavery to sin are broken, empowering believers over the kingdom of darkness. This restored identity changes literally everything. You aren't a repaired version of your old self. You step into the role of a rightful heir with Christ. Moving to Section 3, True Spiritual Authority. Let's shift our focus to how this foundational identity completely reshapes our understanding of spiritual authority. Because let's face it, the word authority carries a ton of cultural baggage today. We often misunderstand it as a license to control people, which is the exact opposite of what we're looking at here. The world's view of authority is usually all about controlling circumstances, racking up personal success, and self-exaltation. But the biblical view, it flips that concept completely upside down. True authority is modeled through humble obedience, serving the vulnerable, and sacrificial love. I mean, the ultimate example is when the King of the universe knelt down to wash his own disciples' dirty feet. He had all authority, and he deliberately used it to welcome children, forgive sinners, and serve. So how do we exercise this authority today? Well, it's definitely not about walking around with spiritual arrogance. First, it means living fully under Christ's lordship, a daily posture of submission. Second, it involves actively resisting the devil in faith, standing firm against darkness. And third, it calls us to act as literal ambassadors of the gospel. This means caring for our neighbors, making disciples, and bearing witness to a totally different kind of kingdom. And finally, Section 4, the eternal fulfillment. Let's look at how this whole incredible narrative builds toward the ultimate endgame of God's plan. Because while we have this beautifully restored identity for the present moment, the story isn't fully wrapped up just yet. We live in this kind of profound tension right now. In this current age, we're called to live faithfully, proclaim the gospel, and sometimes persevere through immense suffering. But we do it with absolute confidence because of what is promised in the age to come. We are pointing toward a day when Jesus returns to establish the new heavens and new earth. Death will be permanently removed, the curse will be lifted, and God will dwell directly with his people. So I want to leave you with a profound challenge as we wrap up this explainer. Armed with this incredible, mind-blowing inheritance, how will you live out your restored identity and authority as an ambassador of the King today? Because knowing exactly who you are, a restored heir, should absolutely change the way you walk into your workplace, your home, or your community this week. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you next time.